Hey guys, what's up?
Hi, nothing, just reading for RDC. These articles are very interesting.
Same.
I know, right? Did you read the articles about healthcare?
Yeah, it was really cool actually.
Oh, did you see the video Professor Gitter showed us in class?
Which one? She showed us so many.
Here, let me show you.
We collected data on problems with social gradients, the kind of problems that are more common at the bottom of the social ladder. Internationally comparable data on life expectancy, on kids' maths and literacy scores, on infant mortality rates, homicide rates, proportion of the population in prison, teenage birth rates, levels of trust, obesity, mental illness, which in the standard diagnostic classification includes drug and alcohol addiction, and social mobility. We put them here all in one index. They're all weighted equally. Where a country is a sort of average score on these things. And there you see it in relation to the measure of inequality I've just shown you, which I shall use over and over again in the data. The more unequal countries doing worse on all these kinds of social problems. It's an extraordinarily close correlation. But if you look at that same index of health and social problems in relation to GNP per capita, gross national income, there's nothing there. No correlation anymore.
I never thought of healthcare in comparison of outside the United States.
Adding to that, don't you find it weird that the healthcare costs in the United States are so extreme compared to other developed nations?
It makes me so mad.
Well, I agree. You guys know the Vlog Brothers on YouTube, right? I saw a really interesting video from them about healthcare.
Who doesn't know the Brothers?
Who are the Vlog Brothers?
What? Just play the video.
Good morning, Hank. It's Tuesday. I want to talk today about why healthcare costs in the United States are so phenomenally, fascinatingly expensive, but first I have to blow your mind. Alright, so you've probably heard that the reason people enjoy quote-unquote free healthcare in Australia and the UK and Canada, etc., is that they pay higher taxes. That money then goes into a big pot and is used to pay for people's healthcare. But in fact, in the United States, we spend more tax money per capita on healthcare than Germany, Australia, the United Kingdom, or Canada. That's right, Hank. You pay more in taxes for healthcare than you would if you were British, and in exchange for those taxes, you get no healthcare. In fact, only about 28% of Americans get their health insurance through government-funded programs, mostly poor people, old people, and congresspeople. But as you can see in this graph, our private healthcare spending, most Americans are privately insured through their employers, is way higher than anywhere else in the world. In total, the US currently spends about 18% of its gross domestic product on healthcare costs. Australia, by comparison, 9%.
These prices are so high, and why are we spending twice as much of our GDP on healthcare costs compared to Australia?
I know, right? It's too damn ridiculous. You know, a New York Times article I read mentioned that a hip replacement in Spain costs about $7,000. In the US, it's over $45,000.
That's really high. I think the reason why prices are increasing so much is because everything else is increasing.
Well, inflation and higher costs in the US can't be the sole contributor to this difference. I think doctors are scared of malpractice suits, so what they do is order too many unnecessary tests to cover it themselves. What this does is increases the health costs. And according to the Commonwealth Fund, the US spends around $55 billion for medicine, but that's only 2% of our entire total health cost.
I'm reading the exact same article as well. It mentions that doctors and nurses are also paid higher in the US compared to other countries.
I wonder if the higher pay contributes to the high cost of care in the US.
The video from before goes on to explain some of the reasons based on the statistics cited in the Commonwealth Fund and the New York Times. Here, I'll put it on again.
But those inefficiencies are hard to measure. Fortunately, there are things that we can measure. So like I said before, because the US is one of the richest countries in the world, you would expect us to pay a little more for healthcare than most people. The question is, when do we pay more than you would expect us to pay? And that turns out to be pretty interesting. Let's start with malpractice and so-called defensive medicine. The idea here is that doctors are scared of huge malpractice suits, so they order a lot of unnecessary tests in order to, cover their butts. That does contribute to our healthcare costs, like there are more MRIs and CT scans in the US than anywhere else. However, there are a bunch of states like Texas that have passed tort reform to limit malpractice suits, and in those states, healthcare costs have dropped by an average of a whopping 0.1%. The biggest estimates for the total cost of defensive medicine put it around $55 billion, which is a lot of money, but it's only 2% of our total healthcare costs. Another smallish factor, doctors, and to a lesser extent nurses, are paid more in the United States than they are in other countries. And by my possibly faulty math, we end up spending about $75 billion more than you would expect us to there. Then we have the cost of insurance and administrative costs like paperwork and marketing and negotiating prices, all that stuff. That's about $90 billion more than you would expect us to spend. We spend about $100 billion more than you would expect on drugs, not so much because we take more of them, but because the ones that we take cost more per pill. Okay, and now for the big one. I'm gonna lump inpatient and outpatient care together because in the US we do a lot of things as outpatient procedures like gallbladder surgeries that are often inpatient procedures in other hospitals, so we're just gonna make it a big ball. That big ball is $500 billion more than what you would expect given the size of our economy per year.
Wow, $500 billion is a lot to spend on each year just on in and out patient care alone. If we were to reduce that amount, the US could save a lot of money.
I read this quote on the Commonwealth Fund about that. Here, let me show you. So it says, were the US to spend the same share of GDP on healthcare as the Netherlands, the country spending the next largest share of GDP on health insurance, savings for the nation as a whole would have been around $750 billion in 2009 alone. And were the US to spend the same share of GDP as Japan, savings would have totaled approximately $1.25 trillion. That's an amount larger than the entire US defense budget.
I mean, from the TED Talk we watched before, Japan does have the lowest level of health issues and the lowest level of income inequality.
Yeah, actually, I do remember about the US having the highest level of health issues and the highest level of income inequality. There are reasons for the rising income inequality in the US, but the rising healthcare costs we are seeing definitely contributes.
Here, take a look at these two charts that I saw. It makes logical sense that the income inequality would be rising.
I saw those charts in the US Census Bureau too. It does make sense if you think about it. We've been reading this semester on how the average income for families in the bottom 40% have stagnated, while the average income for families in the top 5% have risen dramatically. However, if you look at the chart, the average employer-sponsored family premium have risen fivefold since 1988 for both income classes.
According to the chart, a family earning approximately $27,000 has close to $16,000 deducted from their annual paychecks for health insurance, while a family earning approximately $350,000 is also having close to $16,000 deducted from their annual paychecks.
So the poorer families with the stagnant annual incomes are paying approximately 59% of their annual income on health insurance, whereas rich families with constantly rising annual incomes are paying approximately 4% of their annual income on health insurance. That's a huge disparity.
Yeah, so basically, the poor get poorer and the rich become richer. It makes you wonder, if healthcare costs keep rising at the rate that it is, will there even come a time that the families in the bottom 40% won't even be able to afford it because healthcare premiums are higher than what they're making overall?
Oy vey.
Well, based on the Commonwealth Fund, our healthcare costs are dramatically increasing compared to other countries. And if income inequality in the US is left to rise, this is definitely a possibility. Do you think there are any solutions available?
6.5 hours later.
Guys, this is really bothering me.
Well, I guess if we have something like each physician being paid the same amount for each kind of operation or so, then one person can't be charged more than another person in the same kind of setting.
I think another solution could be universal health care, which would allow the last 15% of the population who are missing it right now to finally receive it. And then if you think about it, since more people will be insured, hospitals won't be subjugated to the high uncompensated costs like when uninsured patients enter the hospital.
Also, adding on to that, hospitals will probably also be less likely to shift costs by charging the smaller payers more to make up for the uncompensated costs from people like the uninsured and also large payers who have larger insurance plans that cover more fees.
Also, I think patients should have freedom of choice concerning physicians and hospitals. Currently, some hospitals are able to exploit the wealthiest and privately funded patients, while those that care for the poor are actually suffering under significant financial losses and closings. This is also seen with doctors outside of the hospital setting.
Okay, you good now, Teresa?
Yeah, now I can rest easy.
Good, go to sleep.
Okay, good night.
Good night.